Thank you very much to Heli and Ea for inviting me today. It's been fascinating so far, and thank you for all the organisation. I should say that in Scotland last week it was unusually cold, very, very cold, and the track of the weather system that was causing it emanated from the eastern Baltic. So I think you've been organising it so that I was used to the cold by the time I got here. Either that or there's a very interesting climate change project going on in Finland that we really ought to know about. Anyway, I look after Wildlife Estates Scotland accreditation. It's been running for 5 years now. It has both some challenges and prospects as well. But by way of background, I'm also a farmer, at small scale, about 50 hectares in southern Scotland. I'm also a forester. I have to look after the woodland on the farm as well. It's unusual because about half of the farm is woodland. And so I'm trying to produce a situation where the woodland is actually improved. And I'm also a little game manager as well. So I'm intrigued about the balance of economic and environmental concerns that produces. It's a microcosm of all the land management issues that we face in Scotland. And that's why I took on an interest in project managing wildlife estates in Scotland. I don't want to talk about the initiative origins because my colleague Florian has already talked about that this morning. But the emergence in Scotland obviously followed on from Wildlife Estates Europe developments, and it provides a mechanism for game and wildlife managers to show their commitment to best practice. There was another reason for development in Scotland, and that was local law, which was enacted in 2011. Which was about controlling deer numbers because of overgrazing, the need to ensure that predator management was done properly and under certain rules, and vicarious liability, which means that the owner, the landowner, is responsible for the actions of his gamekeeper, which was a big change. We adapted Wildlife Estates Europe principles for Scotland through the pilot phase, which lasted for 2 years. And we launched in 2013. And since then it continues to be shaped by Scottish Government land use and biodiversity strategies, which themselves come from the Climate Change Act of 2009. So climate change sits behind a lot of what we're doing. We have a range of supporters from Scottish Government to the Agency for Government, which is Scottish Natural Heritage. We're also supported by Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust and the RSPB too. The mechanics that have been required to develop the project in Scotland comprise the application form itself, which is pretty extensive. It takes quite a long time for applicants to work through. But another important ingredient is the database, so that we capture the information that we gather from applicants. And that is essential for us to be able to explain what is going on privately managed land. The applications are independently assessed. We've got support from those organisations, but we also require a bucket load of persuasion to encourage landowners to take part. The aims of the project are quite simple. We want to build a respected conservation management accreditation system. We want to make it accessible to as wide a range of landowners and holdings in Scotland. And we want to develop incentives for accreditation so that people want to get involved. It is a missing piece in the jigsaw in Scotland at the moment that we don't have those encouraging features at the present. So we're relying on the commitment of landowners at present. We've talked about capturing the data, but we also have to recognise, particularly in Scotland, that there's a growing public interest in what landowners are doing. And therefore we have to share information to demonstrate what it is that is happening. Progress to date, on the accreditation side, we have 43 farms and estates that are through the process. They range in scale from 150 hectares up to 58,000 hectares, and the overall total under accredited management is 425,000 hectares. Currently there are 9 applications under assessment at the moment, and we have around 30 other applications which are at different stages of completion. An important part of our project is to make sure that we're reporting, and the types of information that we capture include these: land use and type, designated sites like Ramsar, SSSI, which is special sites of scientific interest, species and habitats, and social and employment aspects that we gather as well. And that's all important because it benchmarks what private land managers are doing. So in terms of reporting, just to give you sort of flavour of what we collect, this is a brief snapshot of the land types on all WES accredited properties in Scotland at present. It goes to show that we're quite dominated by upland, moorland territory at present, but I expect to change as more owners come on board, particularly from the farming sector. Designated sites like Ramsars, we were intrigued because we thought that a lot might not be in very good condition, but in fact almost 60% of the designated sites on our accredited properties were in good condition. So it is a barometer for good management to understand what's happening on those sites. But at the same time, not all site conditions are up to date. The government agency, Scottish Natural Heritage, needs to update some of the conditions so we're up to speed. But also the designations only actually cover 21% of Scotland. So we need to think about what's happening on the other parts of Scotland as much as the designated sites. Species insights. We have a long way to go to understand the full population statistics in Scotland, but the owners, in providing their applications, give us a feel for the numbers of species present, but also whether they feel they're increasing, decreasing, or remaining stable. And these give us particular insights to know what's happening with individual species, which is very useful. But it is what we would call in Scotland citizen science at the moment, and it really needs to be backed up with further research. There are challenges. There are a lot of political challenges in Scotland at the moment. We've got a land reform agenda, which is about coming up with an equitable form of land ownership. We've got an ongoing independence debate in Scotland, and of course it's that dreaded word Brexit as well. At the same time, we've got big conservation issues. We have deer management challenges to meet because there's been significant overgrazing in certain parts of Scotland, and that causes a problem in terms of regeneration. So we need to think about how that's managed. Upland management, because we don't have that much tree cover in Scotland, but we have an ambition to increase from around about 18% at present to around 25%. And of course, climate change. The picture on the right there shows a bridge that was washed away in the storms in January this year. So it's an ever-present issue for us now. So we've got to unravel all of that, the political dimensions and the conservation issues. And I think what we have to do in that challenge is make sure that nature comes first, that it's not beaten by politics. So the prospects. We've got the evidence from accreditation data to improve our best practice management, so it's like a virtuous circle. The data helps us improve on the best practice management. And there's a big agenda in Scotland around something called natural capital. I haven't heard that phrase yet today, but it's very, very topical in Scotland at the moment. As far as that relates to accreditation, I think that needs to be distilled down to what we would call ecosystem health indicators, which can be applied at an individual farm or estate level. And those ecosystem health indicators look like this. These are the kind of things that we're looking to include in our application process in future. Some of them are already there, but I just want to pick out a few. The ecological status of water bodies, so that we know the quality of water, carbon stocks, and eutrophication, which is a problem that I understand is quite topical with the Baltic Sea Action Group at the moment and how that's tackled. Climate change, of course, and soil condition as well. And these are some of the sources of information we will look to understand how we monitor in future. These are all sources which are present in Scotland that we can call on to understand what is happening. These ecosystem health indicators would be assessed at farm or estate level, but they would contribute to overall data which helps us understand our national natural capital insight. So we're next in Scotland, and we're next for Wildlife Estates accreditation. We'll continue to encourage and incentivise participation, and we'll look to refine our assessment process to take account of those ecosystem health indicators so that we've got more precision in the way in which we accredit in future. We'll look to improve the quality and consistency of the data, particularly around species numbers that we collect. And importantly, we'll look to increasingly collaborate with other partners, because at the moment budgets are very thinly stretched in Scotland. So we need to come together much more constructively so that we can share our expertise, but we can also make our monetary budget go much further. In terms of national development, we want to contribute our data to the national scene, so that leads to discussion and improves on best practice. We want to engage with the land use and biodiversity and upland strategies that the government has set us. But also we need to understand that there's a mosaic of different management approaches. And within that, I think it's important to stress that private land managers have a vital role to play in game and wildlife conservation management. Too often we've been put on the back foot in Scotland because of the debate around land reform or independence and what that might mean. But land managers, particularly in the private sector, are very innovative, and we have to be seen to encourage them. And that's what I hope Wildlife Estates Scotland Accreditation will be doing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you very much for your presentation. And here is a
thank you. Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
And now some comments, questions. We have some time for Ross.
Stunned into silence.
Somebody wants to say something? Yes, yes.
You know the percentage of land or privately owned land and public land in Scotland, more or less?
There's about 50 landowners who own more than half of Scotland. Extraordinary, isn't it? But then there are some, one of the biggest landowners is the government as well, through the Forestry Commission Scotland. But it would be useful to have a more equitable structure so that communities can feel that they can participate in land management. So there is encouragement of community buyouts of land to set up local ownerships across more of groups.
So there is some land available?
It usually becoming available when a landowner sells up. That is the usual way in which it's happening at the moment, and the government is providing some funds to enable a community to make a purchase if the landowner is willing to sell.
Okay, thank you. And Juha has something?
Yes, thanks. Relating to the previous question, this is a very general one and anybody can answer, or we can discuss this after the presentations. Or you can, I'm sorry, I have to catch the train and leave soon. But I'm interested in the, we have been dealing a lot with kind of farm level approaches. So how do you feel, how important it would be to be able to work at landscape level over the administrative borders of farms, single farms?
As opposed to the individual? Yeah. It's a good question. I was speaking to colleagues last week who work for Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, who are responsible for river catchment areas. And they are trying to create collaborative approaches around river basin management. So I think there's an approach there that we could adopt to concentrate on catchments and collaborate within those areas, which I think would be a good way forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will go on. Okay, there. Sorry. Yeah. We have some time. No problem.
My question is about grassroots level solutions to management, because you have accreditation system that is kind of brought into or brought to land managers. But when you see that somebody innovates and brings out something of own solutions, is there is a possibility of incorporating this? Is there is two-way flow, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you can suggest what to do, but you can also learn from what's been done.
Yeah. One of the benefits of writing, we write an annual report on all the information that we gather, and through that we hope to provide indications of where things have been innovated, but also we want to expose others to those to the information to see what we can learn from others who want to comment on our report. So that's what we hope to do, more of that.
We have one more there in the back. Heikki can get some exercise.
Hello, I am Esko Tainio from Forest and Park Service. And I was wondering, like you measured, you showed on a slide a picture of a biodiversity measure of a bird atlas, but do you also do inventories of plants and insects in the farms?
Sorry, birds and?
Birds or insects, or I mean, like you had like a bird atlas, one of the ways of you to get information about the biodiversity of the farms in Lapland, I mean in Scotland. And I was wondering if you do also inventories of the, for example, plants or insects.
Yes, we do. It's not very well documented, but for instance, as part of an application, we would look, we would consult a database of information called the National Biodiversity Network, which includes information on both flora and fauna and insects that are located in the area of the farm or estate. So we can cross-reference with that information, which is helpful. So it's not just what the owner puts in the form as well. We can check to see that what he's putting in is correct through another source as well, which is quite useful.
Thank you.
Some more questions, comments for us? If not at the moment, then we will continue.